welcome back to the JrX2 restoration video series. It's time to move on to the JrX2 Shelf Queen build. So if you've been following along, then you're aware that I have taken all my vintage JrX2 parts and sorted them into essentially kits. So I took the manual, took all of my parts, and I went through the manual and sorted the parts into the bags as they're organized when the kit was produced back in 1987. So in this bag is all the parts and hardware that are described in the manual in bag A, bag B, and so on. So we're going to build the kit as close to recreating what it would have been like when it was manufactured back in 87, following the manual like we would have if we had purchased a kit back in 1987. And then we're going to do a compare and contrast with the Team Associated 40th Anniversary Gold Pan RC10. Why? Well, why not? Because I can, that's why. But honestly, I did a build review of a very quick and dirty build review in NestWorks kit, and I did not enjoy the experience. That reminded me that my experience is pretty limited to only two manufacturers. Prior to building that NestWorks, I had only built Team Associated and Kyosho kits back in the 80s and 90s, and then Team Associated kits again in the 2000s when I got back into racing in 2020. So these two buggies are the perfect buggies to build for a comparison and contrast video when it comes to vintage race quality RC buggies. And let's face it, the JrX2 exists because of this car. So the history of how the JrX2 came to be was Gil Losi Jr., he raced for Team Associated. He helped them develop products. He worked on the RC12L. Didn't know that until a couple of weeks ago when the RC12L was re-released as a vintage car in the Team Associated vintage line. And back in the day, in 1984, he helped develop the RC10 while being a member of Team Associated. And the deal was, in exchange for helping develop the RC10, the Gil Losi Sr., Pops, would get 3,000 kits to sell at the Ranch Pit Shop, which was the pit shop that the Losis operated in California. Team Associated reneged on the deal and said, no, we can't do that. We're not giving you that. That's more than anybody else is getting. This story is recounted by Pops Losi himself in a history documentary on the history of Losi and Team Losi. And those videos are out there on YouTube. And if you're into vintage RC and into Losi and want to know the history, Pops Losi himself tells the story. And I misspoke in one of my previous videos where I reviewed the JrX Pro. I mentioned that Pops Losi said, the heck with them, we'll build our own car. But it was actually Gil Losi Jr. who said that, not Gil Losi Sr., not Pops. So I apologize for getting that history wrong. So let's put all of that aside. But the purpose of this ultimately is to build the JrX2 as it would have been organized in kit form, follow the manual, then build the RC10, the 1984 edition. Hopefully it's close to the original. I can't say. I did build a JrX Pro when I was a 16-year-old kid back in 1990 from a kit. So I've never built an RC10 in 1984. I was 10 years old, so I didn't have the opportunity to build an RC10 back in the 80s or even 90s. But I hope for the purposes of this little experiment that it is close to the original production and that the manual is as close to the original as possible, so I can get an experience of what building a kit from 84 would be like compared to building a kit from 87. So that will be after I'll get to this, after I finish the next two builds in the JrX2 series. So tonight we're going to start the JrX2 Shelf Queen. The next build in the series is going to be another JrX2 Shelf Queen using the next best parts that I have available. And really, ultimately, the only difference between this build and the next build is that this chassis has never been drilled. That chassis is actually, the chassis for the next build is actually slightly better as far as conditions concerned, but unfortunately it was drilled. And I want my Shelf Queen to be the best representation of what the car looked like originally as possible. I also have some early production parts with this kit. The side bulkheads are early, the front bulkheads are early, the shock towers are early, the rear shock tower doesn't have any holes in it, the battery strap is an early one. So yeah, I've got original wheels and tires, and I hope, so far I've not had luck getting old dried tires off of rims. Now these are not terribly dry, they're still pretty flexible, so I'm confident that I'll be able to take them off without damaging them, because these are Team Losi tires, but they're not step pin. These are the tires that would have come with the JrX2 back in the day. These are tires off of a Junior 2, but they are the tires that came with the JrX2 kit. They are step pin, and they are essentially brand new. They're not brand new, but they're awfully close to being brand new. They're in excellent condition. Very, very light use on them. So those are going to go on my personal Shelf Queen. These tires will go on other JrX2 rims, also 5-spoke, but just the color is slightly different than this orange, more closely in line with the red on the body. So the plan here is to divide this video. I don't know how to do it in chapters or whatever, but I'm going to do one bag at a time and then stop the recording. So I'll record bag A and then cut it up into bag B, bag C, and so on. So I don't, if anything gets corrupted, it's a smaller part. So we'll fast forward through the building part, and I'll just chime in if there's something of note. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Well, there we have it. Bag A is complete. That was pretty quick. I know you watched it in fast forward, so it's even quicker for you, but for me it was pretty quick. I imagine that's exactly how it would have went from the kit. The only difference was, there were no sub bags. Everything was just thrown into a sandwich baggie. A couple of things to note. Okay, so let's talk about what we've got here so far. So original chassis, no holes drilled. I gotta point this out. This is a small little detail that means a lot to me. Look at these screws. These are the black anodized aluminum screws, and they're almost immaculate. This one has just a hint, right? And my OCD, I put them in there so that they're all actually facing the same direction. So I'm not crazy that some of these screws are proud. They stick up. They don't go flush. This is an original screw that goes into the antenna mount. Even it doesn't go quite flush. So, the countersinking on the chassis perhaps varied from chassis to chassis. And these newer manufactured YFS screws, they don't seem to have the same contour or same angle to their head as other flathead screws. So that's too bad. I really don't like the way they're sticking up, but it is what it is. I would say based on the look of this JrX2 labeled bulkhead, it's early. Also, it was on the car with the early parts, with the early shock tower that has a different feel, a different texture to it. It was on the same car as this rear shock tower that doesn't have any holes in it. That bulkhead, I'm not sure where I got it, but it is an early bulkhead. There's a couple of different types of bulkheads, and some are earlier than others based on the amount of holes they have and stuff. So anyway, and then the original battery strap as well. And by original, I mean like an early one before they went to the actual hinge and not just the molded plastic. So that's it, bag done. Super quick. All right, it's a new day and it's a new bag. Time to move on to bag B. So number 3, part 1, or section 3, part 1, the differential assembly, bag B. So to make this experience as realistic as possible, as if I was building the kit from the way it came back in '87, I actually am going to use, I had diffs that were perfectly good and assembled, and I disassembled them because I want to know what it's like to build a diff following the step-by-step instructions. So I've got the thrust washer and the thrust bearings there. I've got the center gear bearings in that bag. And actually, in this bag, I have brand new thrust diff bearings. So the ones that are in that washer are going to get tossed. I've got some, basically what us old guys would call stealth lube, diff lube for the center gear. And then I've got the thicker black diff lube for the thrust washer. And then after that, after you build the diff, it's to go ahead and assemble the gearbox. So let's put on some bad 80s techno type music for you to listen to while watching me build a gear diff in fast forward. I want to take a second and talk about this tool. I love this tool. This is a vintage tool that came with the Losi kits back in the day. And it's your wrench for adjusting your turnbuckles, but also it is used for adding the universals, the little links here into the joints. And here's how it's intended to be used. So pop the first one in by hand, just halfway, and then one end of this tool is designed to bring it in the other way, not like that. I got this tool, actually this tool came, I don't remember what I bought that I got that tool. I almost think it came with a championship edition RC10 that I bought. And I was like, oh, I remember that. I know what that is. I'm never going to lose that. And then when I started doing these projects, I thought I lost it. I couldn't find it. So pop the ball into the outdrive like that, and then take the slotted part of the tool, put it around the post, push it under, pull it out. There you go. You're in place. There we go. So by using the actual right tool for the job, it avoids scratching up, marring up these plastic parts. You sometimes see them and they have got teeth marks in them from pliers. And that's because someone was assembling or disassembling these universals without the right tool. I get it. If you don't have it, if you didn't know it was included and you didn't know what it was for or how it worked, you use what you got. I get it. I get it. It's just sad and unfortunate if you don't have the right tool for the job. And I am very fortunate to have the right tool for the job. So I've been using it all throughout the restoration of these JrX2s. Well, there we have it. Bag B is completed, and there wasn't a whole lot to Bag B. It was build the diff and build the gearbox and kind of install the gearbox. So far, the gearbox is only being held on with one screw. I jumped ahead and put the spur on there, but not a big deal. It would have taken a little bit longer if I would have had to assemble the install the pin into pinned ball joint. So these little ball joints that hold the universal to the outdrive, those I did not disassemble them, so that part there was time saved there. So that's it. Bag B was pretty simple. Build the diff, assemble the gearbox, put the universals onto the outdrives and the rear pivot block, and that's it. That's it for Bag B. So that's it for this step. Let's go ahead and jump into Bag C. Time to move on to Bag C. So Bag C is the rear suspension assembly bag, and that is where we will be attaching the connecting points for the 5-link suspension, assembling the rear hubs and the axles. So let's jump right into that. First, we'll find you some really bad 80s techno style music to listen to while I assemble this in 10 times speed. Pro tip, if you're building a JrX2 and you want to run it, when you attach these metal balls to the side bulkheads, they have to spin free. If you actually read the manual, they do take the trouble of pointing that out. And I'd stumbled onto that by accident because I'm not such a good reader, which is great if you are building a S-Works kit, because there's nothing in the manual to read, essentially. Perhaps a little bit hyperbolic, but anyway, I had assembled it on the JrX2, and for some reason I had to disassemble it, or something drew my attention to the manual, and that's where I read the line: thread one composite ball joint into top hole of side bulkhead 6, so that the ball is on the outside and can just spin freely. There you go. So make sure that they spin freely. All right, we're ready to attach the next two links from the side bulkheads to the rear hubs. And I want to take a second to point out the links that I'm using here. There are three versions of these links. There's two hole with a little supporting piece molded into the plastic, perhaps to strengthen it. And then there's 4-hole. So these are early ones because they are the 2-hole without the supporting link. So I've been trying to build this car with as many early parts as possible. And I think I'll probably go through my parts later and swap these out, because there's also these top links without a ridge on the bottom on one side. So I've got to go back and I'm not sure what website it is, RC Groups maybe. There's a real good thread that shows the variation of the parts and how they evolved over time. So I might go back and check the story on these top links and see which one is the earlier. And if the one without the ridge on the bottom is the earlier part, then I'll install that. Probably going to swap these out if I find an earlier one. These top links, these are in pristine condition as well, but they may not be the match to the bottom link, where the bottom link is a 2-hole without the little supportive dot. I need to look into the top link that's missing the rib on the inside and see if that is the same version as the lower 2-hole link. That's it for now. Next we'll move on to bag D, which is going to be to start to assemble the steering and the front end. All right, time for bag D. So we're going to be assembling the steering rack and testing the front arms, the hub carriers, spindle carriers, front steering blocks, and what else we got in here? Oh, and we'll be building the steering turnbuckles and the camber links. Let's jump into it. Alright, before I attach these front arms, I want to point something out here. So I have a choice to make. I can put on 2 later pristine arms, or I can put on 1 later pristine arm and 1 very early arm with a couple of nicks on it. And that's the way I'm going to go. Hard on my OCD to have parts that don't match, but I'm looking at it like, well, you know, arm broke, got replaced with a new arm. Because when you went to the hobby shop and you bought a package of arms, they would have been upgraded. You wouldn't have got these, you would have got these. So you could have replaced both, or you could have just replaced one. Hard to say. I'm going to put this one on. I'm going to keep this other pristine arm aside for this car. But also I'm going to scour the internet and try and find a replacement for the one I broke. Because part of this project for me is using the earliest parts possible. So let's go ahead and get these attached. right, let's break down bag D. So it went well. Some variations, I believe, yeah, there are shorter ball studs, and I don't know if I haven't, I must not have any, because these ball studs that I put here with the washer on, they're typically flush at the bottom of the rack. They don't protrude past, so I'm not crazy about that. Assembling the links was fine. Popping them on, I do them by hand, even though it sucks. They're really hard to get on, but I don't want to scratch them at all. One of these shock standoffs was brand new, so I had to cut the threads, and that was a little difficult. So luckily this wrench, the Team Losi wrench, is the right size for that. So that held it in place while I put the standoff screw in from the back. Criticism. Why would we attach all of these things to the tower after the tower's on the bulkhead? It makes it awkward and more difficult than it needs to be. Going forward, I will be attaching everything to the shock tower prior to mounting it to the bulkhead. That only makes sense. The parts aren't in the bag in that order to do it that way, but that's what I've just learned from experience. So if we're going to be criticizing manuals and doing a comparison here, when I built the RC10, that's one thing that was annoying so far, trying to attach the hardware to the tower after the tower's in place. Not the brightest move so far. So there we go. That's bag D, and we'll start the shocks next. Time for bag E. The shocks. We are almost home. After the shocks, then it's cutting on the body and the gear cover and installing the wheels and tires. The wheels and tires will be a painful thing to talk about. There'll be some lamenting going on there, but we're not there yet. So shocks. Let's have a look here at what we've got. So I disassembled everything, as you know, but I left the pistons on the shafts. I left the collars on the bodies. I don't want to stress these collars out at all. These are original first generation collars, and they were fragile when they were new, so you can well imagine how fragile they are now. They're the black plastic. Later on they made them out of gray. Same as these 5-link suspension shock bottoms. Original, near pristine condition, black plastic. Early cartridge inserts. What are these things called? 78. Yeah, shock cartridge. So later on, the nut portion was quite a bit larger. Also later on, these were actually rebuildable. You could pop the bottom off and change the O-rings inside. These are not them. So again, using very early parts. Even the spring cups. Spring cups changed over time as well for the front. So those ones are early. I think that's it. That's all the coolness in this bag. So let's go ahead and let's do everybody's favorite step of building a kit. Let's assemble the shocks. All right, there's the shocks assembled and installed.